Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Teresa Talks. I'm so happy that you decided to join me. I have a great show in store for you today. I have inspiring conversations with authors, published and unpublished. And today's author is published, and you will want to hear everything about his story. Teresa Talks starts right now. I was standing outside looking at the sky. The sun was shining and the clouds were flowing by. My favorite book in my hand. I opened it and look at me, just a little snafu there on the technical side. I want to welcome to Teresa Talks Travis Sackett. He has written a wonderful book called My Life with Karma. Welcome, Travis.
Thank you for having me on, Teresa. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm so excited to have you here. I loved your book so much. But before we get started, let me tell everyone a little bit about you. Travis Sackett is resilience personified. Having overcome an abusive childhood, Travis went to college to study criminal justice, hoping to become an agent of change. While fulfilling this role, he was jaded by severe corruption in the system. During this time, Travis sustained an injury while training, resulting in an opioid addiction that led him to a life of crime. Through the help of his canine companion, he pulled himself up and out of the mud and began living his life again. As a fully disabled individual, Travis refused to be held back by circumstances. He persevered and decided to share his story in his memoir, My Life with Karma, to increase empathy toward often ignored populations that are forgotten or left without a voice. Travis has a lot to say in his book, and I have it here with me. My Life with Karma. There we go. That's a nice picture. And then I have, of course, all my licky sticky tabs down the side, which is what I like to do. I'm old school. I like to have a book in my hand. I do read on Kindle when that's the fastest way to get the book. Sometimes that's what I need to do. But Travis messaged me on LinkedIn and told me a little bit about his book. And I was like, that sounds incredible and like a story I need to read. So I bought it immediately and I got it in a couple days and I began to read it and then pursued him to come on Teresa Talks. And my first question to you, Travis, is My Life with Karma is the title, and it's a little bit of a play on words. So tell us what or who karma is.
It is. So, as you brought up when you were introducing me, Karma was that brilliant, resilient animal. She was a boxer that I rescued while I was working for the Wisconsin Capitol Police.
And so, what's interesting because karma is a bit of a play on words, you can read the title and think that it's your life with karma, as in, like, you're dealing with karma. This is what's happening to me because of karma. You know, what comes around goes around. But karma is what you named your dog. I would love for you to tell us the very poignant and touching story about how karma came to be yours.
Okay, so I had a acquaintance, we'll say, notify me of Karma's existence. Essentially, this individual said, I see this dog at this house and she's chained to a tree. I'm really not sure if you're looking for a dog, but I mean, we had talked a few times and I told him that I loved the bully breeds, boxers, pit bulls, Rotties, all those. And he said, well, I think it might be a pit bull. I'm not exactly sure. You're going to have to check it out. So one Saturday when I was not working, I decided to make the trip was about a 20-minute drive from where I live into the country. And eventually, as I was pulling up, I saw this giant oak tree, just this big old, probably 100-year-old oak. And attached to it was a chain. And at the end of the chain was a dog. And I could barely make out the dog. She was small, very emaciated, just not in very good shape. So as I pulled up the driveway, I'm looking at this animal and I'm thinking to myself, I need to intervene or she's going to die. So essentially, I went up to the house, knocked on the front door, banged pretty hard, and no one answered. However, I did see the blinds move a little bit, so I knew someone was in the house. And I knocked again, still no answer. Then I decided to go back, look at the dog some more, and essentially it broke my heart right there. I couldn't see a dog in that kind of condition where the ribs were showing, the backbone was showing. There was blood coming from the paws. There was a dish there, but there was no food or water for the dog. And I just, inside, it ripped me up. So as I'm trying to decide what to do, basically, I saw I had two options. Either I can take this dog with me or I can leave and she's probably going to perish. So in my heart of hearts, I couldn't allow that to happen. So instead of going home, I went to a nearby hardware store that I passed on the way and bought a bolt cutter. I came back to the house, knocked on the door again, and yelled through the door that I had money that I was willing to pay for the dog. I just wanted to see it go to a new home, essentially go to my home. And once again, no one answered. No one seemed to care. So after some careful negotiations, I was able to get the bolt cutter on the chain around the tree and essentially get Karma into the car and take her home. So, and that evening, that's when I decided to name her Karma, because when I was unloading her from the car, she took a little bite at me because I moved too quickly. And I forgot that this was a rescue animal. And I kind of took the situation for granted. And she reminded me, she's like, okay, we're going to have to take this slow. So that's where Karma came to be Karma.
Right. So you put her in the car with chain and all, right?
I did, yeah. I didn't even take the chain off. Just the way that she reacted, she growled a few times. She never really snapped at me, like, but you could tell she wasn't used to human handling, and the human handling she did have was not the right kind. I mean, she immediately was very head shy, would duck away. If you would even move toward her, her first move was to retreat. So it was very sad, just to see an animal that had that little trust in humans. And basically, I wanted to change that.
Mm-hmm. And so you described your wife's reaction when you got home with her in the book. Why don't you tell us about that?
Man, so I was afraid to tell my wife at the time. We already had a golden doodle at home and two cats, and then she had a horse out at the barn. So we were pretty much deep in animals as we were going to be. And here I come home with another one. I opted to tell her that I got her from a guy at the gym, not that I saved her from a tree, and that essentially he was having problems taking care of her and that she was going to be joining our home. Well, she took one look at her and said, that's not coming in the house. Like, there is no way. So for that evening, I made Karma a makeshift bed in the garage, made sure I got a space heater, things like that, got her food, got her water. And then I ended up on the futon, not sleeping in bed with my wife, but yeah, instead on the futon, relegated to think about my actions and what I had just brought to our house. So.
Now, see, I might have thought you would have taken the other tact and said, "Honey, look at this dog. I saved this dog's life. I have rescued it from certain death." To spin it that way, so you could be the dog's champion and the dog's hero and do it like that. But you didn't think about that, or
No, to be completely honest with you, I've never really been good at spinning things. I think maybe that comes from my police background.
right?
And we'll get into more of that later, but really, I didn't have a good story. I just thought to myself, well, if I tell her how bad a shape this dog's actually in, she may not let me keep it, or say, let's take it to the Humane Society or something like that. So
Oh,
instead, I decided I'm just going to say, hey, I got it from this guy at the gym, and we're going to go from there.
oh, okay. So, well, good idea. So the next day you took Karma to the vet. Was it the next day?
It was the next day, yeah.
Right.
And I found out basically all these horrible things that they thought had happened to her. For example, they thought her dew claws were removed with pliers, which is just horrible to even think of.
Mm-hmm.
And her teeth they were in really rough shape to the point where they couldn't actually age her based on her teeth. And they think that was from chewing on the chain trying to get free.
Yeah.
So she needed extensive dental work. Her tail had been cropped, not necessarily the way it should have been by a vet, but it was it was done to the point where it was healing. So the vet said, "Well, that's a good thing." She had Demodex, which is a form of mites. I mean, pretty much, and she was about 30 pounds underweight. They gave me a rough estimate of her age, and said she was between 1 and 2 years old, and she should be around 60 pounds. And when I brought her in, she was 31 pounds. So
Oh dear.
yeah,
Yeah. So she needed a lot of love and a lot of attention and a lot of vet care, right?
yeah,
She was
that's
in the vet
true.
for a week, you said? In the vet?
No, no, I believe it was 2 days. She
Oh, okay.
stayed overnight the first night. She was also spayed at that time,
Mm,
and they did some work on her teeth, as well as the dew claws. They ended up having to, I think, remove some infection, do some stitching. But essentially, she was there for 2 days, pretty much in recovery, getting fluids, getting food, pretty much everything they needed to do just to bring her back to a functioning baseline is really what the vet did for me. And I'm so grateful for that.
right. Well, and then as the years went by, did she fully recover from looking like the rescue dog? Because I know in the book you say she had the marks around her neck from the chain. Did she have permanent scars around her neck from that, or did those all heal up and then
Um,
go away?
That's a great question. They healed for the most part. You could still tell, like in certain sunlight, you could kind of see where there was scarring underneath, but all her fur grew back, so that pretty much covered up some of the scars from the past.
Oh, okay. Okay. She plays such a huge role for you and all that you went through. And so I want to dive into that a little bit. And you talk about that you were a police officer and you were with the Capitol Police. And this is the capital of the great state of Wisconsin,
Yes.
uh, home of the Green Bay Packers, of which we are huge fans in this household. Um, so just to establish that that's the state that you are in. So then I have to ask, did you always wanted to be a police officer and be in law enforcement?
So I did. A lot of that stemmed from my childhood. I grew up in an abusive home, where my dad was basically uncontrollable alcoholic, and when he drank, he got physically and verbally abusive. So from an early age on, I kind of saw the police as protectors, as someone that was able to step in and change situations that were like mine, situations that were just not good and where the home wasn't necessarily a safe place. Um, I also viewed them as protectors, and as protectors, that's kind of where my role came in with the Capitol Police. I was assigned to dignitary protection, so I did protection for one of Wisconsin's governors, which was a very cool experience for the most part. And it really it took that childhood dream and kind of put it front and center stage. So it was awesome. I was doing what I loved for a short period of time, and that was great.
Awesome. Now, did the police ever come to your home when you were a child? Did you see them in that role in your household, or was it just in society in general as the protectors of society?
Once again, great question. So I did see that growing up. My dad was actually arrested at one point in time for stealing and concealing a bottle of vodka, along with, I think, some toothpicks and something else at a grocery store. I'm sure that he was intoxicated at the time of arrest, and the police brought him home. So that was one of the times that I'd seen the police at my house. Um, they had been called maybe two other times in my life. My mom made the call when she felt that my brother and I and her were unsafe. However, nothing really ever stemmed from that. It was more or less they came, they checked. My dad put on a facade and acted like, nothing was wrong, and they ended up going on their way. So they never necessarily really intervened in some of the abuse situations, but like I said, I did see it when my father was arrested for stealing.
Right. You're very vulnerable in the book, and I think everyone who reads it is truly going to appreciate it. And I think children of alcoholics who read your book will immediately identify with you, because your father was a high functioning alcoholic, as you refer to yourself in the book, as a high functioning addict. He was a high school principal. Your
Yep,
dad
that's
was.
correct.
And
Yeah.
he probably drank every day to
Oh,
make
yeah.
it through his days. And so he was probably very good at faking it and covering it up and gaslighting your mom, making her
Oh, for
think
sure.
that it was her fault and her problem. And so that's probably how he convinced the police that there was nothing going on, when she called him to the house. And you're very real in the book when you talk about when he was arrested and it was in the paper the next day, and then he was basically busted in front of the whole community. And it was a small community that you lived in, and there was no more hiding it. And he instantly, everything that he identified himself as was lost to him. And by no fault of your own, as the family, you suffered the fallout and the repercussions of his behavior. And you're just so real about it in the book. And I think it's just one of the things that make the book so endearing to the reader, is how you're so open about all the things that you went through. You really hold nothing back, about that, and about the things that happened to you later in life. And moreover, you don't make any excuses about it. You don't say, well, I did that because of this. You just recognize it as a possible behavior pattern that many children of alcoholics can fall into. This, you know you didn't have a role model in a better way to be. But one thing that you do, well, you fall into your first uh, bout with or exposure to OxyContin from a motorcycle accident that you're in, and you're prescribed it like millions of people were. And you were, or could have been, on the road to addiction to the OxyContin at that time, until your doctor begins to wean you off of it and prescribe you, a lower dose type of painkiller. But then something happens that really slams you into sobriety. Explain that to us.
Oh, definitely. So essentially, shortly after my motorcycle accident, while I was still recovering, my dad ended up in the hospital, and it was very severe. They said his liver and kidneys were failing. He was, I believe, 52 or 53 at the time. And they told us that because of his alcohol abuse throughout the years, essentially it was cirrhosis of the liver and kidneys. And he was also not eligible for a transplant because he refused to say that he wouldn't drink. So they essentially told him, well, you're not eligible for a transplant and you're to the point where, I mean, organs are shutting down. And there was really no way to bring him back from that. So my dad was in the hospital for approximately 2 days before he passed away. And that definitely slammed me into sobriety, because I looked at his death as something that I couldn't prevent, but I could learn from and I could grow from. So I immediately wanted to be sober, for my family, for anyone who needed me. And then there was also the added responsibility, being the oldest child. Right away, I was made executor of his estate. And since he didn't have a will, it all went to probate court, and I had to pretty much become the man of the house, step up and deal with all of that and those proceedings.
Right.
So it was a lot to take on, especially for someone just transitioning from high school, getting ready, going to college, and then all of a sudden having this happen.
Right. And you talk about that as well. And it's interesting. I think because it gave you such a sense of purpose. My dad passed of a heart attack when I was 20. Of course, my mom, she was only 47 years old and she was a widow. But even with my dad having a will, it still went to probate, and there was so much to be done. It's interesting that there's so much to be done just because someone dies. And so I think that I'm just looking at my notes I wrote in the margin. I wrote sobriety. Because it gave you a sense of purpose and you felt the responsibility. And so you stepped up to the plate. You said you were 21 in here. So you were in college. Then you talk about college in the cornfield. And then you did feel your oats a little bit in college and so forth. And then you go into the academy, and you're, looking after the governor, like we've talked about. And then you're very serious weightlifter, quite the serious weightlifter. So I went through your social media, and you have, pictures of you on there, and you were quite buff and quite large. I mean, you were deadlifting, right? And I think that's where you turned your attention to just bodybuilding and lifting those weights and stuff. And then you had the back injury. Yeah. And then you ignored your doctor's advice. And I don't want to, use that broad brush to, stereotype the male of the species.
Yeah.
But sometimes that happens, and you don't listen to doctor's advice. So on that note, when we come back, Travis is going to tell us about his back injury and his second round, I guess we'll say, with OxyContin. So we'll learn about that when we come back.
Okay. Sounds good.
welcome back to Teresa Talks. We are talking to Travis Sackett, the author of My Life with Karma. He is very real and vulnerable in this book, talking about his life as a police officer, the child and the adult child, well, I guess early adult child of alcoholic father who passed away. And then now we're coming into his second bout or a second run-in with the drug Oxycontin, and then how it affected him and where he went from there. So it stemmed from a back injury. So why don't you pick the story up from there, Travis?
Okay, well, essentially, so like you said, I was really big into weightlifting. Powerlifting was everything for me outside of work. And I injured the L4, L5 disc in my back. At first, it was an injury, then it was something more. The disc began to bulge, and essentially, one became herniated. When that happened, I continued to lift through it. I just saw it as it was something that hampered me, but it didn't completely stop me from lifting. So I really wanted to go and compete at Worlds for the powerlifting. So I went to a doctor and said, look, this is what I'm experiencing. This is the back pain that I have. And the doctor right away said, well, this looks like you're going to need surgery. And to me, those words went right in one ear, right out the other. I didn't hear him. All that I really heard was, okay, so this is going to be a bigger hurdle than I thought it was going to be. But I was going to continue to lift regardless. So he prescribed me 3 different drugs. One was Oxycontin, one was something for spasms, and another one was for, I believe, just to help me sleep. It was something along those lines, but immediately the oxy worked. It worked to the degree that I was able to lift about 85% of what I was lifting before the injury. So I felt like this was a miracle drug. I really didn't see any issues with it whatsoever, aside from the fact that, like I said, I was able to go into the gym and do almost what I was doing without the injury. And before that, I could barely even bend over to tie my shoes without the Oxycontin. So that was the difference. It made a huge difference. And I was immediately hooked on that difference. I saw that drug and I was like, okay, this makes all the difference in the world. This is what I need to be able to perform and get to that next level of powerlifting with this injury. So I took the drug as prescribed. I did that for 30 days. And then I ended up going to a walk-in. I didn't go see the same doctor. I saw a different doctor. And I ended up getting a 90-day supply of Oxycontin on top of the 30 days. And during that 90 days, that's where addiction set its hooks in. That's where I started clock watching to where I could take my next dose, when I could take it. I was also seeing that the dosage was no longer as effective as it was early on. So I was doubling up what I was supposed to be taking, which also meant that my supply lasted a lot, half as long, exactly. So I was running into all sorts of problems. And then on top of it, I had a doctor who basically said, you need surgery or you're going to be cut off. So I did what I did, and that was I looked for an alternative source for the Oxycontin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you doctor shop, or that's when you started finding like pill suppliers?
Well, I doctor shopped a bit, and for those that don't understand what that term is, it's basically going from one doctor to another, usually walk-in clinics, or things that aren't necessarily as regulated to look for medication. So I did that a bit. Like I said, I was afraid to even go back to the original prescriber. for the refills, just because I knew he was going to say, look, we've got to get you to a specialist. We've got to move this thing along, where I wanted to slow play it as much as possible so that I was able to continue to lift and compete. So like I said before, I ended up going through an alternative source, which was someone that I lifted with at the gym, had come to know fairly well. I mean, as a friend, as a lifting partner, and that person eventually became my drug dealer.
So were you just trying to get through the world's competition, or were you just never going to have the surgery? Because, I mean, what did you see the surgery as a weightlifting end? That if you'd had the surgery, you could never lift weights again?
I did, because I was told that I would have to have a fusion, and the way the doctor made that sound, it was like, okay, running, like, probably was not gonna be on the cards
Right,
anymore.
right.
Like, definitely not bending over to deadlift, things like that. It seemed to be so limiting, and at the time, I was still relatively young that I wasn't willing to go through that. I was like, well, what if I just continue on the path I'm on and I find something that can mitigate the pain? Because I could deal with everything else, like the spasms, I could deal with. I even figured out, well, if instead of bending over to tie my shoes, if I kneel down on one knee, I can tie one shoe and then I can alternate and do the other without actually having to involve my back too much. So I was starting very early on to learn different ways to kind of work around the injury.
Mhm.
And the only time I couldn't do that was when I was weightlifting, because there was such a load and there was such a strain on my back that it was what it was. So that's where the medication piece came in and really allowed me to, like I said before, continue lifting, continue pursuing that dream. The other reason why I really needed the medication was at work. One of the hardest things was where my gun belt sat. It sat directly on the injury itself.
Uh,
So when I was sitting, when I even standing, it was
Pushing on that.
constantly, yes, constantly pushing on it. So I was feeling it almost all the time,
Mm,
and I needed something just to mitigate that pain.
because you don't mention that in the book. You don't mention that your
Uh,
gun belt was constantly pressing against it. So that
yeah.
makes perfect sense. So the I'm sad we're not going to get through a lot of this. So we're going to call this interview part one.
Okay.
And I know we talked about February, but I'm going to have you back for January so we can have part two and it not be too far separated from this interview. Is that okay?
Yeah, that would be wonderful. I
Good,
would love that.
good.
Thank you.
Because I'm jumping ahead in the book to when you were already working your security job and you were in supervision
Okay.
at the university. Because I underlined on here when you said you were at your worst. Okay, at your worst, you were snorting a crushed line of pain meds directly off the your work desk prior to beginning your shift at 7 a.m. Between the never-ending runny nose, frequent sick calls, and erratic quantity. I'm gonna have to actually put my glasses
That's
on for
okay.
this. There we go. Now we've seen me. An erratic quantity and quality of my work. Someone should have at least pegged me as a cokehead. Perhaps growing up with an alcoholic father taught me to mask my addiction so well that those closest to me um, failed to see it. You asked with a question mark.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah, and that's, I mean, to be honest, like I was working with security and law enforcement every day. I mean, and nobody ever questioned me. Nobody ever even pulled me aside and said, "Hey, what's the deal? What's going on? Why is your work all over the place? Why are you calling in sick constantly. And I wouldn't, to be honest, I wouldn't have had answers for those things aside from, well, I have a problem and this is the problem that I have. But I was so afraid to share that with any one of my
Oh,
coworkers because of the stigma attached.
well, for
And
obvious
yeah,
reasons, it would have absolutely derailed and ended your career as law enforcement. There was nobody you could tell.
exactly.
Right.
So I just kept everything a secret and continued to work and tried to do my best each day with the habit that I had. And that was how I operated for almost a year and a half. Just going to work, snorting pills, and then I would do that too. It wasn't only in the morning. In the book, like I definitely wrote in the morning, but it was also at lunch. I would need to do it over again because I would start to feel things. And I needed to be numb, and that was the only way I felt comfortable. That was the only way I felt good in my skin, was that kind of numbed out feeling that the pain meds left me with. So I was constantly taking them. As soon as I started to feel any kind of pain, I knew right away, this is time for me to take the medication again.
Right.
That was my,
Right, because there's a lag time, right? You have to take it so it can start like working to numb the pain before the pain gets to be unbearable.
exactly, exactly. And something that other drug users will understand, especially if you used Oxycontin, the reason why I would snort one is it would actually kind of give you an upper type feeling, where normally the drug kind of gives you a depressive, down, or in that clouds kind of feeling. By snorting one, I was able to kind of pick myself up and I wouldn't hit that lull quite as bad. Where if I took two orally, I would get very tired on it. And even then, I was still chasing it with, well, energy drinks combined with pre
Mhm.
workout. So I was pretty much like probably doing around 500 to 1,000 milligrams of caffeine each time that I did that. Yeah,
Wow. So you're just kind of killing your body at every turn. Like, so the
exactly.
caffeine is like wrecking your stomach and your kidneys, and the OxyContin is like wrecking your brain and your brain chemistry and all of that stuff. And I mean, I imagine that in your mind, you're just obsessing over, uh, you know, how many pills do I have left? And do I have enough? And when is it going to end? And when am I going to make the call? And when am I going to buy more drugs? And that almost to the point that you couldn't like do your work other than the fact that, as you mentioned in the book, the job was just a means to which you could buy the drugs you needed, um, to to fix the pain you were experiencing. And all you're doing is just constantly trying to numb the pain.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's really, you hit it right on the head. It was just trying to alleviate that pain. There was also a mental health piece in there too that we haven't talked about,
I
I,
know.
that I didn't have addressed until later on in life. So I was self-medicating for that as well. So there were multiple reasons why I was taking the drug. And without it, like I said, I I couldn't function. I ceased to be able to really exist without that drug in my life at that point in time.
Well, and what what we come to learn about the OxyContin is that the it numbs the pain for which you originally are taking it, but then when you stop to take it, the pain that you feel is so much worse.
It's more intense, yes.
Um, and it's because of the pain that the withdrawals from the drug is now causing you. So that pain that you're feeling is like not just your back pain, right? It's like it's the pain that you feel like in your head. So you suffered like the migraines and what else did I write down? The migraines, um, well, then you have the short-term memory loss from like a future incident. See, we have so much still to talk about. We have so
We
much
do.
still to talk about. Let's go to like one more commercial break, and we'll come back, and we'll just pick which thing we're going to talk about here as the show draws to a close today. But we'll definitely have Travis back for at least one, if not two more, until we just get through his book to talk about all the great things. The great things, I don't know, but all of the things that Travis has to talk about. We'll be right back. Here we go.
Teresa Talks is a new kind of interview show. I'm your host, Teresa Cundiff, and I won't just be interviewing authors who write books. I'll also be interviewing authors who will be writing books. We will have fun and you will be informed and entertained. And you won't want to miss Teresa Time, where I share what's on my heart. Teresa Talks is brought to you by Wordy Nerd Media and distributed by Legrity Media. Teresa Talks can be found on all these platforms, on these smart TVs, and wherever there is internet around the world. I'm excited for you to join me on Teresa Talks.
Hi, we are back with Travis Sackett, who has written just an incredible book that's packed with so much stuff that we've really just skimmed the surface of all the things that he talks about in the book. I've told him already that I feel like the screenwriters are going to be knocking on his door and beating it down to want to tell his story, to bring it to Netflix or Hulu. I feel like that's going to happen. I told him I'm just happy to be part of his story here at the beginning as it takes its next chapter. But
Love it. That's awesome.
I think I'm so clever sometimes. But I am so enthralled by this book, and there's so much to talk about. Because I let's see, I underlined something else. It says, it talks about, today, most experts will agree that addiction has little to do with one's ability to keep their life in order. Instead, they view addiction as a chronic brain disease. And I think that it's taken decades to get to this place, because people who have never suffered addiction don't understand that. They just say, why can't you just stop it? I think that, like for me, the closest thing I'm addicted to is sugar. And, I cannot eat a piece of chocolate cake and it doesn't affect me either way. It causes me no pain. It just maybe makes me sad. And that's kind of it. And but those of us who don't understand addiction don't understand it. But I think that we are coming more to understand that addiction is something that has absolutely reprogrammed the circuitry inside of someone's brain, and don't understand heretofore why the alcoholic couldn't put the drink down. Just stop drinking. Don't go to the store. Don't buy it. Don't have it in your house. Don't hide, bottles in your car. Just not understanding how the body craves it and has to have it. But I think we're coming to understand that more now. What do you think?
I would agree with you. I think as we would learn more about brain chemistry, honestly, and as we interview and talk with more people like myself, people who have struggled with addiction, we realize nobody ever woke up and said, "Look, I want to be an alcoholic or I want to be a drug addict." It was just, it happened. And why it happened, I think now we're able to start answering those questions when we look at family history, when we look at, like I said, brain chemistry, and we really kind of get to know each one of these individuals. We find similarities in the stories that make us think, okay, well, there's more to this than someone simply just wants to drink, and or wants a pill. I mean, and then you start breaking it down and talking about things like cravings, and you really come to realize that this is so much bigger than just the will to say, no, I'm not going to take a pill, or no, I'm not going to drink. And that's why I think it's so important that people who have had addiction, like myself, and have struggled with addiction, talk about it, because it helps to crush that stigma and have other people who maybe don't understand or say, hey, I could just quit. Like, I can have a beer and not, not worry about it. I think it really helps with those people to kind of come full circle and realize, hey, there's more to this than just willpower.
Yes, exactly. And the thing that's really unconscionable about the OxyContin in particular is that it was a prescribed drug. And I would recommend to my viewers here today that they watch the sort of docudrama series on Hulu called Dope Sick. And it kind of walks the viewers of that program through what the makers of the drug kind of went through, and and all of that. So I'll just leave that at that. But that it was a prescribed drug, and that so many people who became addicted to OxyContin had no idea what was coming.
Exactly.
They just had no idea what was coming. I mean, you certainly did not. You didn't, and so you fell prey to it, as did millions of people. And it's really sad. I put on the ticker where you can reach out and get in touch with Travis. He is using Facebook for now, so he would love to hear from you. So reach out, and you can obviously message him through Messenger on Facebook, but you can also send him a friend request. Easy for me to say. His book, he also has an author page on there we go, on Amazon. And you can read more about him there on his author page. But here is My Life with Karma. I cannot recommend it highly enough. We have really only scratched the surface. We have not talked about more of his life as a police officer and some of the things that he experienced there. We have not talked about the chapter in here is called Cop to Criminal. We have not talked about his incarcerations, and that's plural. So we have those to talk about. We haven't talked about his lovely wife, Vanessa, and their whopper of a first date.
True.
We have not talked about a crazy piece of artwork that threw everyone into a tailspin. So there's still lots and lots left to talk about. And so we're definitely going to have part 2 of this interview coming up in January. So you don't want to miss that. I'll make sure I put it out on the socials when we get it scheduled, and when I'm going to have it dropped on Legrity for you guys to be able to watch it, because you don't want to miss it. Travis, you are an amazing young man, and I've loved having you here on Teresa Talks.
Well, thank you again, Teresa. Oh no, I see the lightning quizzes coming up. Now I feel like I'm on the hot seat for sure.
You definitely are on the hot seat, but you'll be happy to know that there are no wrong answers.
Okay.
Only you know these answers, so they cannot be wrong.
Okay.
You just have to answer truthfully, but it is the lightning quiz. So you have to be okay.
Gotcha.
I can't
Okay.
do that, but my fingers are too dry. Okay. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do
Okay.
it.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how good of a driver are you?
9.
Very good. What's your favorite song?
Ooh, Son of a Sailor by Jimmy Buffett.
Okay. Place you most want to travel?
Ooh, Amsterdam.
What's your favorite junk food?
Ooh, flaming hot popcorn.
Oh. Do you ever post inspirational quotes on social media?
Yes, I do almost daily.
Same. Cats or dogs? We know.
Dogs.
We know. Giving presents or getting presents?
Giving for sure.
Who's in charge of the thermostat at your house?
Vanessa, hands down.
Regarding the toilet paper, over or under?
Ooh, over.
Climb a mountain or jump out of an airplane?
Climb a mountain. I'm afraid of heights.
Have you ever been to Africa?
No, I haven't.
What's your favorite color?
Blue.
Dark chocolate or milk chocolate?
Milk chocolate.
For a journal, paper or computer?
Paper.
Who inspires you?
Right now, I would say biggest inspiration is probably Gary V.
That's a good one. What's the name of the street you grew up on?
Martin Place.
Who is your favorite fictional character?
Oh my goodness. Can I say pass? Can I pass on one? Is that possible? Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay. What historical character would you like to meet?
Jesus.
Awesome. What is one of your favorite smells?
Ooh, fresh cut grass.
Me too.
Really? Okay.
Yes. Oh, and this one is fabulous. Who will play you in the movie of your life? As an adult, we'll say.
Let's go with Bradley Cooper. I would love to see that.
Yes. Oh, what a great choice. What a great choice. I love that. Yeah, it's Bradley Cooper. Perfect. Ding, 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 ding. You passed the lightning round, the lightning quiz, and you got all the answers right.
That's awesome. It's probably the first time that I've gotten every single answer right. So thank you for that.
Well, I've loved having you on for part 1 of your interview. And so
it's been excellent.
Yeah, and it's all your fault for putting so much stuff in your book, but I'm so excited that you're happy to come back on. I can't wait. And we'll get everything scheduled for you to come back on in January in season 3. And we'll talk more about your book. And if we don't get through it all, then we'll just come back on and season 3, well, probably twice then in season 3, January and March. And we'll get through your whole book. And plus we can catch up with what is going on in your life. And if the screenwriters have started knocking on your door yet.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, true. So Travis, thanks so much for coming on today, and we'll talk soon.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you again for having me, Teresa.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
My favorite book in my hand. I opened it and I